There's a version of you that you've never met. Not the one in the mirror. Not the one who shows up to work, smiles at the neighbors, says the right things at dinner. Someone else. Someone who lives just beneath all of that. Someone who decides things for you before you even know a decision is being made. You felt it this week, maybe yesterday. That moment when you reacted to something small and the reaction was way too big. That flash of irritation at the wrong person. That strange sadness on a Tuesday afternoon. That comment you couldn't stop replaying in your head, even though everyone else forgot it 5 minutes later. That wasn't you, not the you that you think you are. It was him, the other one. The one Carl Jung spent his whole life trying to understand. And here's the part that's hard to sit with. Until you meet him, he runs the whole show. Your relationships, your money, your patterns. The things you keep choosing even though you swore you wouldn't. So tonight, slowly, we're going to do something most people avoid for an entire lifetime. We're going to turn the lights on in the room you've been pretending isn't there. Carl Jung was 60 years old when he wrote something that most people never recover from reading. He said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." Read that again, slowly. Because what he's saying is brutal in its simplicity. The parts of yourself you refuse to look at don't disappear. They get heavier, darker, more powerful. They don't go anywhere, friend. They just go underground. And from underground, they run things. Think about your own life for a second. Think about the patterns. The same kind of relationship that keeps finding you. The same argument with a different face. The same financial ceiling you keep hitting. The same self-sabotage right when something good is about to happen. The same conversation with your father that you've been having since you were 12, even though he's been dead for 15 years. You've probably told yourself it's bad luck, or bad timing, or that people just don't understand you. Maybe you've blamed your parents, your ex, your boss, the economy, God. But Jung would lean across the table, look you in the eye and tell you something you don't want to hear. The pattern isn't out there. The pattern is in here. And the part of you creating it is the part you've spent your entire adult life pretending isn't real. He called it the shadow. And the shadow is not evil. That's the first thing most people get wrong about it. The shadow is not the devil. It's not your dark side in some Hollywood sense. The shadow is everything about you that didn't get permission to exist. Think about that. Everything about you that didn't get permission to exist. When you were a kid, somewhere between the ages of 3 and 7, you figured something out. You figured out which parts of you got love and which parts of you got punishment. Which parts of you made your mother smile and which parts made her go cold? Which parts of you your father praised? And which parts made him walk out of the room? You didn't decide this in some conscious way. You couldn't have. You were too small. But your nervous system was watching, always watching, cataloging. And you were smart. You were a survivor. So you did what every child does. You took the parts of yourself that didn't get love and you buried them. You shoved them so deep that eventually you forgot they were ever there. You forgot you were ever loud. You forgot you used to draw. You forgot the version of you who cried easily, who asked too many questions, who wanted to be held more than was acceptable. But here's the thing about burying something alive. It keeps breathing. It keeps growing. And it remembers exactly who put it there. Maybe what got buried in you was your anger. You learned that good boys don't get angry, so you became calm, reasonable, easy to deal with, the one everybody could rely on. And now, at 45, you can't figure out why you feel numb half the time, or why your blood pressure is climbing, or why you explode over something microscopic once every 6 months and scare yourself. Maybe what got buried was your softness. You were told men don't cry, so you built walls. You became strong, reliable, unmovable. And now you can't reach your own son. You can't tell your wife what you actually feel. You sit in the truck for 10 minutes after pulling into the driveway and you don't know why. Or maybe what got buried was your wanting, your hunger, your ambition. You learned somewhere that wanting too much was greedy, selfish, ungodly, so you became humble, small, easy to overlook, and now you watch other people live the life you whisper about at 3 in the morning, and you tell yourself you never really wanted it anyway. That whisper, that ache, that's the shadow knocking on the door. Here's something Jung understood that almost nobody talks about today. The shadow is not just the bad in you, it's the disowned in you. And sometimes, this is the part that breaks people open. Sometimes what's in your shadow is your gold. Read that twice if you need to. Because for a lot of men your age, the thing they buried wasn't their rage or their lust or their darkness. It was their genius, their tenderness, their capacity to love something deeply, their voice, their gift, the strange specific thing they were born to do that nobody around them understood, so they shoved it down, called it foolish, and went and got a job. That gift didn't die. It went into the basement. And now, 30 years later, you keep meeting people who have what you should have had. You watch them and you feel something you can't name. You tell yourself it's admiration. But if you're honest, in the quiet, it's grief. And underneath the grief, there's something hotter, sharper. Something that looks a lot like envy and feels a lot like betrayal. That's not weakness. That's information. That's your shadow telling you exactly what you abandoned. Jung had a phrase for this. He said the things we most envy in others are the things we have not yet allowed ourselves to claim. The man who can't stand confident people is usually the man who silenced his own voice. The woman who criticizes wealthy people the loudest is usually the one who buried her own ambition the deepest. The person who rolls their eyes at anyone showing too much emotion is almost always carrying a flood they never let themselves cry. We don't see people, we see mirrors, and the mirrors we hate the most are the ones reflecting the parts of ourselves we exiled the longest. Now here's where this stops being theory and starts becoming your actual life. Because the shadow doesn't whisper, the shadow doesn't write you a polite letter explaining what it needs. The shadow speaks through your behavior, through your patterns, through your reactions, through the moments you swore would never happen again. And then they happen again and you sit in the kitchen at midnight wondering what is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is unmet in you. There's a difference, and it's a difference that took me years to understand. Because for most of my life, every time something in me erupted, I thought I was broken. I thought there was something fundamentally defective about the way I was wired. I imagine you felt that too, that quiet conviction late at night, that maybe you're just made wrong. You're not. You were just never taught how to listen to the parts of you that were trying to speak. Think about the last time you got disproportionately angry at someone. Not regular angry, not the anger that fits the situation. I'm talking about the moment when somebody cut you off in traffic and for 30 seconds you were a person you didn't recognize. The moment when your kid said something small and you reacted like they'd betrayed you. The moment when your spouse used a tone, just a tone, and you were 10 years old again and you didn't know why. That overreaction is a doorway. Jung called these moments complexes, knots in the psyche, old wounds wearing modern clothes. Every time you overreact, your shadow is showing you exactly where the unfinished story is buried. Most people spend their whole lives apologizing for these moments, smoothing them over, saying, "I don't know what got into me," promising it won't happen again. And then it happens again, and again, because they're treating the symptom and ignoring the message. The shadow doesn't want to ruin your life. The shadow wants to be seen. That's all it has ever wanted, to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be brought home. And until you do that, it will keep knocking, louder, heavier, through your relationships, through your body, through the dreams you have at 4 in the morning and try to forget by breakfast, through the strange ache in your chest that no doctor can find a reason for, through the thing that goes wrong every time something is about to go right. You can keep running. A lot of men do. They run for 60 years. They die confused, full of regret, wondering why the life they were promised never showed up. Or you can stop, right here, right tonight, and turn around and look. There's a story Jung used to tell, and it stays with you for years after you hear it. He said, imagine a man walking through the woods at dusk. He's been walking for hours. He's tired. He wants to get home. And as the light starts to fade, he notices something behind him. A figure, following at a distance. Same pace, same direction. He walks faster. The figure walks faster. He slows down. The figure slows down. He turns around to confront it, and the figure is gone. He keeps walking. The figure comes back. Most men spend their whole lives running from that figure. They walk faster. They build careers tall enough to outrun it. They drink enough to stop hearing its footsteps. They scroll enough to drown out its voice. They fill every silent moment with noise so they never have to hear what it's trying to say. But Jung said something extraordinary. He said, the moment you turn around and walk toward the figure stops being terrifying. Because the figure was never a stranger. The figure was you. That's the work. That's all of it. The whole thing. And here's why this matters specifically for someone in your stage of life. Because in your 20s, you can outrun the shadow. You're fast. You're hungry. You've got time. You can build, achieve, distract, accumulate. You can stack enough between you and the figure that you almost forget it's there. But somewhere around 40, 45, 50, something shifts. The body starts sending letters. The mind gets quieter at 3 in the morning. The achievements that used to feel like proof start to feel hollow. You look at the life you built, and on paper it's good, it's enough, it's what you said you wanted. But there's a feeling you can't name, a weight in the chest, a question you don't ask out loud. Jung had a name for this too. He called it the second half of life. And he said something nobody warned us about. He said the goals of the first half of life and the goals of the second half are not the same. They're almost opposite. The first half is about building the ego, becoming someone, proving yourself, making your mark. earning the right to exist in the world. The second half is about meeting the soul, becoming whole, letting the false structures collapse so the real self can finally breathe. And the bridge between those two halves, the only bridge, is the shadow. You cannot become whole by adding more to your life. You become whole by reclaiming what you exiled from your life. The anger you swallowed at 14, the grief you never let yourself cry at 23, the dream you killed at 31 to be responsible, the version of yourself you abandoned to become the version everyone else needed. All of that is still in you. None of it died. It's waiting in the basement holding a candle, waiting for you to come down the stairs. And I want to say something honest now, something most teachers won't say. The descent is not pleasant. Anyone who tells you that meeting your shadow is a healing journey full of light and butterflies is selling you something. Real shadow work is uncomfortable. It involves grief you didn't know you were carrying, anger that scares you, memories you'd worked hard to bury. Sometimes it involves sitting with a part of yourself you've hated for decades and learning, slowly, that it was never the enemy. It was a child doing the best it could with what it had. But here's what nobody tells you about the descent. On the other side of it, something happens that can't be described in a sentence. The static stops. The static you've been living with your whole life. That low hum of unease, of something's not quite right, of is this it? That static stops because the war is over. The civil war you've been fighting against yourself, the war that's been draining your energy since you were a kid, finally ends. Not because you defeated the enemy, because you realized there was never an enemy. There was just a part of you that was waiting to come home. And when it comes home, you don't become someone else. You become finally, fully, undeniably yourself. The man you were always supposed to be. The one who got buried under everyone else's expectations. The one who's been sending you signals through your dreams, your patterns, your inexplicable longings for 30, 40, 50 years. He's still in there, and he's been waiting a long time. Let me tell you how the shadow actually shows up in a life, not in theory, not in a textbook. In a real Tuesday morning, it shows up in the way you can't stop scrolling, even though you hate yourself for it. It shows up in the third drink, the one you swore you wouldn't have. It shows up in the affair you almost had, the one you tell yourself was just a flirtation, just a fantasy, nothing real. It shows up in the way you can't sit still in a quiet room without reaching for something, anything, just to make the silence stop. The shadow runs your compulsions, all of them, every single one. Because compulsions are what we reach for when there's a feeling we don't want to feel, and the feelings we don't want to feel are the feelings we exiled. So every time you reach for the bottle, the phone, the food, the screen, the work, you're reaching for an anesthetic. You're trying to numb a frequency that keeps trying to surface. That frequency is the shadow asking for attention. And here's the cruelty of it. The more you numb, the louder it gets. The more you avoid, the more it follows. The figure in the woods doesn't get tired. The figure in the woods has all night. The figure in the woods is part of you, so it goes everywhere you go. The bar, the bedroom, the boardroom, the funeral, everywhere. You cannot outrun yourself. Nobody has ever done it. The wealthiest men on the planet have tried. The most famous people in history have tried. They built empires to outrun this exact feeling, and they died with the figure still standing at the foot of the bed watching them go. So if you can't outrun it, what do? You turn, you sit down, you let the figure approach. Jung had a practice for this. He called it active imagination. Some people now call it shadow dialogue. The names don't matter. The practice is simple, and it's hard, and it changes everything. You sit somewhere quiet, no phone, no music, just you. And you ask a question, out loud or in your mind. What in me am I refusing to see? And then you wait. You don't answer for it. You don't fill the silence. You wait, and something will come. The first time, it might come as a sentence, a memory, a face, an image you didn't expect. Don't argue with it. Don't analyze it. Just let it speak. If it's anger, let it be anger. If it's a child, let it be a child. If it's something monstrous, let it be monstrous. Because here's the secret Jung discovered, and it's the same secret every wisdom tradition has been trying to tell us for thousands of years. The monster stops being a monster the moment you stop running from it. There's a story in the Tibetan tradition about a man being chased through a forest by a demon. He runs for days. He's exhausted. He's terrified. Finally, he collapses, and the demon catches up, and the man does something nobody ever does. He turns around, he looks the demon in the eyes, and he says, "What do you want?" And the demon, the one he's been running from his entire life, looks back at him, tired, ancient, sad, and says, "I want to be acknowledged. I just want you to see that I'm here." That's it. That's the entire teaching. The parts of you that scare you the most are the parts that have been waiting the longest to be seen. They're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to come home. And there's one more thing here, and this is where it gets uncomfortable, so stay with me. The people in your life who trigger you the most, the ones you can't stand, the ones whose voices, whose faces, whose mannerisms make something rise in you that doesn't make sense, they're not your problem, they're your mirror. Jung was relentless about this. He said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Everything. The arrogant coworker, the needy sibling, the selfish ex, the lazy son, the greedy boss. The people you've decided are the reason your life is harder than it should be. I'm not saying they're not difficult. Some of them are. But the intensity of your reaction is the message. Mild people don't bother you. Mildly arrogant, mildly needy, mildly anything, you barely notice them. The ones who set you on fire are the ones holding up a mirror to something you've buried so deep you don't even remember burying it. The man who drives you crazy with his confidence is showing you the voice you silenced. The woman who irritates you with her vulnerability is showing you the tears you never cried. The relative whose laziness disgusts you is showing you the rest your body has been begging for since 1987. This is hard medicine, I know, but this is also the door. There's a moment when you start doing this work when something strange happens. You start to notice a softening, not at the world, in you. The boss who was unbearable last month is somehow tolerable, not because he changed. He didn't change. You did. The mirror lost its charge. Whatever he was reflecting back to you got seen, got acknowledged, got brought home. And now when he speaks, you just hear a tired man doing his job. The wife who used to push every button you had, somehow those buttons have fewer wires now. The fight you've had 1,000 times doesn't ignite the same way. You hear her voice, and instead of going into the old reaction, there's a half second of space. a pause. And in that pause, you choose something different. That space, that half second. That's what shadow work buys you. It doesn't make you a saint. It doesn't make you peaceful in some manufactured way. It makes you free. Free to respond instead of react. Free to choose instead of repeat. Free to actually be present in your own life instead of running someone else's program from 1972. And this is where Jung becomes profoundly practical. Because he wasn't just a mystic, he was a clinician. He sat with thousands of patients, he watched them transform, and he noticed something that almost nobody talks about today. He noticed that integrating the shadow doesn't just heal the individual, it changes everyone around them. Because here's what most self-help culture gets wrong. It tells you to fix yourself in isolation, heal your trauma, do your work, become your best self, as if you live in a vacuum. You don't. You live in a system, a family, a marriage, a workplace. Every system has a balance. Every system has roles. And when one person stops playing their old role, the whole system has to recalibrate. When you stop being the angry one, somebody else in your family is going to have to start carrying that energy, or the family is going to have to evolve. When you stop being the silent one, the dynamic at the dinner table changes. When you stop being the rescuer, the people who depended on being rescued have to grow up or they have to leave. This is why shadow work is dangerous in the best sense of the word. It doesn't just change you. It disturbs the equilibrium of every relationship you have. And some of those relationships will not survive your evolution. That's the price. Jung never lied about that. He said the path of individuation is a lonely path at first. Because you're walking out of an agreement everyone around you signed, including the version of you who signed it. But here's the other side of that loneliness. The relationships that do survive it become real, possibly for the first time, because they're no longer based on who you were pretending to be. They're based on who you actually are. Your wife stops being someone you're performing for and starts being someone you're actually known by. Your kids stop being witnesses to your unfinished business and start being people you can actually see, not through the fog of your projections, but as the souls they actually are. And then something else starts to happen, something Jung wrote about with a kind of awe. He said when a person fully integrates their shadow, they become a source of consciousness in the world. Other people, just by being around them, start to wake up a little, not because they're preaching, not because they're teaching, just because they're being. There's a quality to a person who has met themselves. You've felt it. You've met one or two of them in your life. People you couldn't quite explain. People who didn't say much, but you remembered them for years. People who somehow made you feel more like yourself just by being in the room. That's not personality. That's not charisma. That's wholeness. That's what happens when a human being stops being at war with themselves. And the world right now is starving for that. We have plenty of opinions, plenty of content, plenty of voices yelling about what's wrong. What we don't have is wholeness. What we don't have is people who have done the long, slow, unglamorous work of meeting every part of themselves and bringing it home. That's the invitation Jung was making. Not to be better, not to be more spiritual, not to ascend, to be whole, to be a complete human being walking around on this planet, no longer running from yourself. And the strange thing is, and this is the part that took Jung decades to articulate, This kind of wholeness isn't something you achieve. It's something you allow. It's not a project, it's a homecoming. The self you're trying to become is the self you already are. Underneath everything that was put on top of you, you don't have to build it, you have to uncover it. And the only way to uncover it is to stop turning away. If you've made it this far with me into this part of the conversation, I want to pause for just a second and say something directly. This kind of work, the kind we're doing right now, doesn't get talked about much anymore. Most of what's out there is noise, quick fixes, 3 steps to a better life, hacks, shortcuts. And there's a reason for that. Real depth doesn't sell well. It's slower, it's quieter, it asks more of you. So if you're someone who values this kind of conversation, the slow kind, the honest kind, the kind that actually changes something inside you, then I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and stay with us. We're building something here for people who are tired of the surface, people who are ready to go a little deeper, people who, like you, are old enough now to know that the easy answers were never going to work anyway. And if there's someone in your life who needs to hear this, send it to them. Not because they asked, because some conversations are gifts, and gifts don't wait to be requested. Now, let's keep going because there's something I haven't told you yet, and it might be the most important part of all of this. Jung wrote near the end of his life something that almost nobody quotes. He said, "I would rather be whole than good." Read that sentence again, whole, not good. Because here's what he understood that most religious traditions, most self-improvement systems, most of our culture has gotten wrong for centuries. The pursuit of being good, the pursuit of being only the bright parts, the acceptable parts, the spiritual parts, the parts you can show in public, that pursuit doesn't make you a better human being. It splits you. It creates the very shadow that ends up running your life. Every person who has ever tried to be only good has ended up doing harm. Look at history. Look at every institution that has tried to suppress the so-called darker dimensions of being human. They didn't disappear. They went underground, and they came out sideways. Through abuse, through hypocrisy, through cruelty dressed up in righteousness. The man who tries to be only patient ends up cold. The woman who tries to be only kind ends up resentful. The community that tries to be only loving ends up suffocating. Because life is not made of one thing, life is made of opposites held together. Light and dark, joy and grief, strength and tenderness, the capacity to be gentle and the capacity, when necessary, to be fierce. A whole person doesn't choose one. A whole person carries both and uses each in the right moment with consciousness. That's what Jung meant by individuation. It's not becoming someone new. It's becoming someone complete. Someone who has integrated the polarities. Someone who has met every part of themselves and stopped fighting the parts that don't fit the brochure. And here's why this matters specifically for you, right now, at this stage of your life. Because somewhere along the way you got handed a script, maybe by your parents, maybe by your church, maybe by your culture, your job, your marriage. And the script told you who you were supposed to be: the good son, the provider, the strong one, the reliable one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who handles it. And you played the role. You played it well, better than most. You earned the praise. You got the job. You raised the kids. You did what you were supposed to do. But there's a part of you that knows. There's a part of you that has always known. The role isn't the whole story, the role is just the costume, and the man wearing the costume has been waiting, sometimes for decades, to be allowed to take it off. That waiting man is your shadow, and he's not who you were afraid he'd be. He's not the monster they warned you about. He's just you without the script. He's the version of you that wasn't permitted, the laugh you didn't laugh, the tear you didn't cry, the thing you wanted to say at the dinner table when you were 17 and instead just stared at your plate. Bringing him home isn't a betrayal of the man you became. It's the completion of him. The good son grows up and becomes a whole man. The provider grows up and becomes a human being. The strong one grows up and learns that real strength includes the willingness to be soft. This is the second mountain. This is the work of the second half of life. And almost nobody does it consciously. Most people stumble through it, half asleep, blaming everyone around them for what they refuse to see in themselves. But you have a choice. You've always had a choice. And the choice is whether you're going to die as the costume or as the man. There's a thing that happens when a man finally turns around in the woods. He doesn't recognize the figure at first. He thought it would be a monster, something terrible, something that would justify all the running, all the years, all the avoidance. But the figure is old, older than him, and tired, and patient. The figure has been walking behind him his whole life, not to attack, not to consume, but to deliver something, a message, a piece of him that got left behind when he was too young to know what he was leaving. And when the man finally stops, finally turns, finally lets the figure approach, the figure doesn't speak. The figure just hands him something, quietly, without ceremony. It's a piece of himself. The piece he buried at 6, at 12, at 22. The voice he silenced. The hunger he denied. The tear he swallowed. The dream he killed because it didn't fit the plan. The boy who used to look up at the sky and feel something the adults around him had stopped feeling decades ago. The figure hands it back and walks away, and the man stands there in the woods alone, holding something he didn't know he'd lost, something that had been missing from his chest for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be whole. He stands there and he weeps, not from sadness but from recognition. The way you weep when you come home after a long, long trip, and the door opens, and the smell of the place hits you and you realize how much of yourself you'd left at the door when you walked out all those years ago. That's the work. That's all of it. It doesn't happen in a weekend. It doesn't happen in a workshop. It happens slowly, over years, in moments. In the half-second pause between the trigger and the reaction. In the question you finally let yourself ask. In the apology you finally let yourself receive. In the dream you finally let yourself remember. In the silence you finally let yourself sit in, without reaching for anything to make it stop. The shadow is not your enemy. The shadow was never your enemy. The shadow was a child holding a candle, waiting for someone to come down the stairs. And tonight maybe you went down a few steps. Maybe you didn't go all the way. That's okay. The figure is patient. The figure has been waiting 50 years. It can wait until tomorrow. It can wait until you're ready. But know this. The figure does not leave. The figure does not get tired. The figure is part of you, and it goes where you go. And the only way home, the only way to the life that has been waiting underneath the life you built, runs straight through the room you've been afraid to enter. So this week, when something small triggers something big in you, don't apologize for it. Don't smooth it over. Don't reach for the bottle, the phone, the noise. Just stop and ask, what in me is asking to be seen? What part of me has been waiting in the dark for someone to finally turn the lights on? And then listen. That's the whole practice. That's the whole teaching. That's everything Jung spent 85 years trying to say. There is nothing else. No technique, no course, no guru. Just you and the figure in the woods and the long walk home. If this conversation moved something in you, if you felt the figure shift behind you while we were talking, share this video with 5 people. 5, not 100, 5. The 5 who you know are walking through the same woods you're walking through. The ones who don't talk about it, but you can see it in their eyes. Send it to them. Let them know they're not alone in there. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We're going somewhere together, slowly, and I'd like you to come. And in the comments, tell me one thing, just one. What would you want to talk about next? What's the question you've been carrying that nobody else has asked you out loud? Tell me. I read them. And the next conversation we have together, it might be because you asked for it. Until then, walk gently. The man you're becoming is already inside you. He's just been waiting a long time for you to come home.